It is a new installment of the iconic and somewhat renowned mascot series debuting back in the days of Medarot 3. It is RAP01P, with the kit of Charge Plant, Double Sacrifice, Light Legs, and the leg ability of Charge Shot, which passively buffs success and power of equipped shooting parts as long as a certain Metaforce gauge is met. Now, as another installment in the mascot series, P doesn't really stray too far from the norm that the original Rappy actually had set, with primarily being a somewhat Metaforce reliant as well as having sacrifice reliant in terms of how he fights. But in contrast, P actually rounds himself out just a little bit better and has just a little bit more synergy with himself to make him a more suitable model and more user-friendly version of the mascot series. Charge Plant, and pretty much iconic to every model of him prior, is a setup skill that upon placing this plant on the field will passively grant just a little bit more Metaforce when charging it on that turn. So instead of getting your usual 30% when charging, you instead will get 40% or so, making it easier for him to unlock any Metaforce reliant buffs or nukes, or even allowing him to charge Metaforce faster so he can release a nuke or a buff of his own. Sacrifice on both arms is instead a shooting version of the attack, which means that upon attacking the target, he will deal a fixed amount of base damage, but because it is sacrifice, he will also add up to 50% of the arm's remaining HP into base power, making the hit even more painful. But upon attacking the target, the part will also self-destruct at the end of the turn, and can only be brought back via use of Restore or First Aid or something that brings it back. Light Legs, in a slightly change of an event, means that he will have a higher base mobility and evade compared to previous models of the mascot series, but also at the cost of having very light armor, which is kind of expected to that of a flight-based model like him. In terms of armor, he's not bad actually. I'd say he fares just a little bit better than predecessors, but also stays within the same range as well, making him kind of rounding him out. With a head HP of about 3,000, arms about 2,750 each, and the legs at 2,900 means, again, as expected of a flight leg, he will be moderately light on the armor, and making it very easy for him to take down. Plus, because he is a flight-legged model, anyone that is packing anti-air on them in some form or fashion will absolutely shoot down this mascot type pretty much before he even has the chance to actually do anything. Plus, even though he is packing some actually very impressive base power between his two arms, his right arm packing just over 1,300 and his left at just over 1,400, he does have a pretty solid base power going for him, so he has that in his favor. But with a max HP of 2,750, it's not bad, but it would certainly be encouraged to buff that as high as you can possibly get it to absolutely make the most of every shot. But this is where the rubber meets the road, and this is where P stands out as a better model than his predecessors, primarily because of the leg ability of Charge Shot. Because unlike Rappy, who had Mascot, which doesn't really synergize well, Charge Plant, Sacrifice, and Charge Shot can synergize incredibly well with each other to make the hits even more painful as long as you can charge for it first. So placing Charge Plant on the field and activating Charge Shot, then going in with Sacrifice will most certainly make the most of those blows, even if they break after 2 uses and he becomes a one-and-done model. His leg stats as a flight leg are very lightweight and kind of to be expected for flight legs, with the mobility of 872, again kind of to be expected for flight legs, and an evade of 1710 is very nice, as it means he will have a pretty decent time dodging or grazing attacks, especially to keep his damage low. But a melee resist of 310 is horrendously bad, as it means that anyone that does manage to get up close and personal in his space will most certainly knock this mascot type down pretty much before he even has a chance to start. And a shoot resist of 903 isn't bad, but unfortunately it's also not high enough to really forgive that abysmally low melee resist. All this being said though, as a pure set score, I still do have to rate P a pretty solid 6 out of 10, primarily for the fact that compared to previous model Rappy, P actually synergizes with himself much better and can be made as a more user-friendly version of a mascot type model if you are led to use him. My first question though would be why, if there are much better models to use, but that'll honestly break down more to preference, since this model is an event reward and not really obtainable unless you participated and collected him. As mixed parts, I do have to rate him just a little bit higher at about a 6.5 out of 10, even though he has very good synergy between Charge Plant and Charge Shot, the very low melee resist on his legs make it very difficult to use him effectively well, even though Charge Plant by itself can be put to incredible use depending on the team you put it on, especially if you can't fit Metaphor Sustain anywhere else on the team. And Sacrifice, if you are able to maybe bump up the number with some HP chips, could also be put to moderately good use if you pack it right, especially with that very impressive base power he has. So if you, especially given the fact, in addition to the fact that they are also non-heavy, means you can fit them into a team moderately well without really having to, well, sacrifice too many holes in your team.